I'm here, Doug is out, Paula is here. Kathy Suglin is out, Michael Bender is here, Megan Juflis is online, and Jay Byers is in the room. Dennis Tulamari Jr. is out, Bob Friedman is here, and so is Chuck Chen. We'll see Megan for Doug and Jay for Kathy.
You said Megan for Doug?
Yeah.
And Jay for Kathy.
Jay for Kathy. Yep.
Thank you.
First order of business. Do we have minutes? I have minutes in my background. I just had two agendas in mind. Oh.
Sorry.
Taking a motion to approve the minutes. Thank you. Thank you. Can I get a second? I'll second. Thank you. Any questions or comments on the minutes?
I have just one correction. We had Jay Byers listed as both attendant and absent.
Okay.
You were there.
Many places.
I pulled up the YouTube. You were there.
I was here.
It's taken from the absent, but
Very good.
Mr. Chairman, I also have a comment. I suggest on page 2, the last line of the narrative, before it says with any, I would urge the insertion of the word regulated activity.
Okay. Anything else? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstains? Very good, thank you. Do we have the applicant for the referral?
I don't think I'm done.
Do we table the referrals?
I'm texting or emailing the applicant now.
Okay,
Is it possible for us to act without the applicant being here? I mean, in your opinion as land use director, having reviewed the materials?
I just heard the door.
okay.
Or maybe not.
You could talk about and review them and go forward, but if you have any questions, if I'm not able to answer them, the applicant's not here to answer them.
is it out of order to take action if they're not here, or would we have to table? Is that what you were asking, Paul? Would we have
Right.
to table them if they're not here, or could we even decide to take action?
Yes, that's, yeah, that's.
I mean,
Well,
you could take action on them, but
Uh-huh.
I think you wouldn't want to put the applicant at a disadvantage if there were questions.
Right.
That we don't know the answer to.
Right.
Well, I'll start by saying that a review of the materials suggests to me that in fact this property had been used and documented for many years as industrial use property, and somehow due to paperwork, whatever, has been called, labeled, AA1, zoning, zone. And that it's almost like not quite bookkeeping, but that it makes total sense to change it now. I don't know, I was waiting to hear if there's a different interpretation of what is going on. On the face of it, to me, it seemed clear that.
Well, that's why we need the applicant,
Positive.
right? There's the questions to the applicant is, what's the purpose? I mean,
So the petition is to amend the zoning regulation map for a parcel that on the zoning map is AA1 residential or two parcels. Except the argument here is it's listed on the street card in the assessor's office as being industrial zoned. Which is an error, so it's not, it doesn't mean that the zoning map is an error, it just means there's an the zoning map is the zoning map and it's the AA1 zone. So just because the assessor has it listed as industrial, doesn't mean we're correcting the map, they're petitioning to amend the map to,
But my cursory review of the AA1 permitted uses and exceptions does not include warehousing and other industrial activities such as this applicant is engaged in, whereas the industrial area does. And I just kind of assume that.
so there's some nonconformities with the use on the
Yeah,
property
it's
and the
been
residential zone.
used all this time as
So-
industrial and, okay, anyway.
So
okay,
the-
perhaps I jumped to the
So
wrong
the-
conclusion, that's why I asked you, so, okay, thank you.
So they're trying to correct the zoning so that it fits with the uses there, and this
Yeah.
came up. Because in addition to the current building that's there, there's some stockpiling of material that we have no records in our zoning. That they're going before the Wetlands Commission to discuss, because it's within the 100-foot upland review area. We have no records of it in the files, so this is how the discussion started. The property is in two zones. And that was why the applicant was coming here tonight to, somebody's got their hand raised, is there?
It's me. Sorry, it's hard to, I don't want to interrupt anybody.
Well, go to the attendees.
Go ahead.
I'm just hoping, I just sent an email.
So that was my original question too, because the applicant makes it sound like it was an error in the zoning map that's being corrected, but I don't know that we have the basis to know that it was the zoning map that was the error, or if it was the assessor's data that was the error, which, Chris, it sounds like that's what you're suggesting. And so in our purview, our question is not, does the use conform to one zone or the other? Our question is, does this change conform with our plan of conservation and development and our goals and objectives therein? So when I was looking at it, I was looking at the location of the parcel. It's next to a residential zone. It does have a couple of industrial properties next to it, but it's within the area near the train station and Main Street on the one hand, and then the marsh on the other hand. So I would say, as far as goals and objectives in the POCD, it leans more towards either like a residential mixed use kind of a thing, or towards a conservation preservation kind of a thing, and not necessarily towards a industrial thing. That's just my initial perspective on it, but I kind of wanted to frame the question.
I mean, I agree with your interpretation and the question. It's does changing this assist the plan of conservation and development, or does it detract from the plan? I guess my question to Chris is, when you have an issue like this, do you look to the zoning map as being the source of truth and the assessor being incorrect?
So we often find parcels that'll say on the field card from the assessor, zone business, but on the zoning map, it's residential. So just because however it's fed in doesn't necessarily mean it's correct. The zoning map is the official map, so.
And
So that's the source.
So we're,
as a commercial entity.
that they need to take up with the assessor. It says nothing.
Asking, have they been taxed as a?
I don't know, it has nothing really to do with the plan of development, and it's not really a correction, there's an issue with what's on the assessor's records that is going to be corrected to reflect the current zoning map. The issue at hand is the proposed petition to go from the AA1 to the industrial zone consistent with the plan of development?
Also, is it AA1? The map looks like it's actually A right there, not AA1. And both the applications say change from AA1 to I. When I pulled up like the map geo, and looking at the card there, and like one of them.
So I'm looking at
Yeah.
the supporting materials with the
Yeah.
application, not. So they identify the properties. I actually put together this map because I thought this
Yeah.
would be helpful. This was not from the applicant. So it shows the parcels.
Like this way, it's like, it's even labeled A, which is like that yellow color.
No, it's I actually didn't see, it says residence AA1. That's not the one.
Okay,
So okay, so further down in the map provided by the applicant, it looks like it's cut off. So
Yeah.
this map here, I put together for you, it's a zoning map 62, 64, and 66 River Street with a date of September 18th. So I wrote the addresses and then I put that yellow is residence AA1. So 62, 64, and 66 are immediately adjacent to the residence AA1. Or they're in the AA1, but they're also right next to an industrial
Yeah,
zone
no.
as well.
yeah, I said, I thought it was A when I looked at the map. Last night, that's why I was confused there. It looked like on like the property cards, one showed as an A and one showed as an I. But that was kind of,
So the property cards are generated through the assessor's office.
yeah,
And that's for taxing purposes. I'm not sure. What we're looking at, the applicant did go through and makes this argument, they've been, and I don't know how that impacts the taxing, I wish the applicant was here, but it's kind of irrelevant. We're looking at parcels that are currently zoned AA1. And the request is to change that to the industrial zone.
And if we don't change it, the existing use would still be fine as a nonconformity. But if we do change it, well, I guess if we don't change it, the existing use is fine. But if they were to tear it down and try and expand it or change it, they would have to conform to the residential zoning. But if we changed it and they decided to tear it down and do something else, they could make it something else allowed in the industrial zone. And would that change get us again closer to or further away from our POCD goals and objectives?
I want to defer until the applicant's here. Because I have questions for the applicant. I want to know what their plan is. And why.
So the applicant owns the parcels, if you look at the map, this.
Yeah.
With the
The
blue,
one they provide.
the applicant owns the parcel 3737-1 with the industrial buildings. And then the two parcels that are vacant, except one of them appears to have some paving or asphalt from that use on.
Right.
was there maybe some like storage?
So the parcels, I guess, have been always separate parcels. They were acquired by the current owner from one individual, so they've always been kind of together as a group, but they were never merged, so that's a lot of times the reason we merge the lots.
Mhm.
So we don't end up in this situation
Yeah.
where you have this multiple uses.
Right.
And multiple zones.
You need a motion to table then, or?
So, well, I mean, Karen can go upstairs and try to get a hold of the applicant. Unfortunately, I don't have the applicant's cell phone number. Hold on. So you can try to call. Why don't you try to do that and we'll just move on to the workshop?
Yeah.
That may be.
Sure. Yeah.
All right, so I think this is his office number, the attorney. So you know we can try to call Steve Hogan, who's the property owner. me see if I can get it. Let me just see. Let me check, Terry, I'm trying to get the phone number for the applicant.
Okay, so we can blunt.
Table it for now, but hopefully get a hold of the applicant.
See if they hear. Moving on, so we've spent the better part of a year, learning and listening.
They're on a housing task force now for those in the audience.
Oh, sorry.
So we've tabled the application for the petitions to amend the map with the hope that the applicants will be able to make it here tonight.
Right.
To present. If not, the commission will table it to another meeting, and we're on to the item 5 housing task force discussion.
Right, thank you. That's the just a full
Mhm.
planning. So with that being said, I asked to compile a list of the top five things you learned along the way, and what are your top 5 problems that you see with housing in Old Saybrook. I've gotten comments from Chuck, Dennis, and Bob as ChatGPT. So before I go into what they have to say, Mike, you want to share your thoughts?
Yeah, I Ross, I'll give you a copy.
Okay.
I had it up there, but I mean, some of the, at least for me, the biggest learnings were just, the blocker in Old Saybrook is our lack of, septic really limits the amount of density you can have here. I thought the study from, I think, the regional one, just about like the mismatch between what kind of houses are available and what kind of households are out there that, single family homes, but usually it's like 1 to 2 person households is more the average size. I didn't know that was out there. I thought a lot of the grant and subsidy programs we heard about are really seem like 10 units and up, so they're all really targeting large developments. Like those are, that's really what all the benefits, all the promotion, everything out there is sort of targeted toward that. End result of that being, we get more apartments, we don't get more like home ownership opportunities. I thought it was interesting, one of the developers, made a comment that you're having like more smaller houses on a given size piece of land could actually end up with like a higher ROI and like investment for developing it, like, 3 600 square foot houses versus 1 2,000 square foot house. You can actually get more out of the sale at the end of that. I thought that was, the developers would build smaller houses, build more stuff if we let them do that. And the state really had their focus on sort of transit oriented development here.
Jay, what were your top 5 learnings?
I did not complete the homework, so.
I get no credit with you.
You got to sit in the corner.
I was in the corner of Facebook.
Follow.
Well, as far as the things that interested me or I found helpful was, of course, the technical background and the problems in renovating old structures and changing use in terms of the codes, the engineering involved. the other thing that fascinated me was a discussion of how affordable housing bottom line is calculated and how that whole bureaucracy is run, which, was interesting. And then I lastly found all the zoning regulations, you know, in terms of affordable housing and all the different zones and the requirements of interest to me. That's, I guess that in terms of the speakers also, that when the private contractors talked about the difficulties of producing private housing and again, the cost trade-offs, the same issues. You know, what they can build, what they're interested in getting into it. And the fact that there are so many other factors, like, didn't really occur to me that topography would be such a big cost factor. And, you know, I mean, they mentioned a number of factors, you know, in the process. So those were the things that stuck out to me.
Megan,
So I have it split. Are we splitting our responses or are we doing everything all in one go? Because I have it split between, should I just go? Okay. Okay. So there is definitely a need for housing in Old Saybrook. I think that's well established, not just affordable housing, but across variety and price points. That Old Saybrook has an opportunity and a desire to increase housing supply and opportunity around the transit station with CMDA, formerly MRTA, and the TOD plan, and now also the DOH grant. That Old Saybrook has done a lot in terms of zoning regulations to try and increase housing supply, but they're not always being utilized, and we're not quite sure why. And that septic, land constraints, and costs are hindering all development, but particularly affordable and deeply affordable development.
so from my point of view, you know, we have a definite need for, I'm gonna say, mid to lower end housing. We have enough luxury housing in Old Saybrook, I think. And I think the developers are constrained or feel constrained because we don't have large plots of land that can support the septic that's needed for, say, 5 houses on, you know, 2 acres. And how do you get water to it? Because we're not everywhere served by public water. There's a lot of wells still out there. So you run into that issue. But I think it comes down to working with developers to increase their ROI, and I'm not quite sure how we would do that. But I think that has to be a way of approaching this. We can't just think the developers are going to do it on their own. I think it's a combination of the town, the state, and the utilities working together, which would be a miracle by any stretch of the imagination. So that's where I come from. What about problem? Well, Chuck basically, you know, made the point that all the presentations, all the developers, builders, and attorneys, social really know and understand Connecticut's affordable housing requirements. The local and regional statewide agencies are working hard to address many quality of life issues.
So I'm gonna interrupt just so one thing, not everybody's gotten all of these.
Right.
So anything that was sent just to you, this is all new for us, so just
Okay.
just,
Yeah, I think Chuck and Dennis sent it just to me and Bob sent it to the whole group.
okay. So anything you sent just to Nick, if you could send it to Karen and I, because we were just trying to, we're gonna try to
Well,
compile
I'll forward it
something.
on to you, yeah,
Okay, perfect, thank you.
so that you don't have to take notes here. And Chuck also feels that the Old Saybrook zoning regulations do not stand in the way of affordable housing. Hopefully I quoted you correctly.
That's what I said.
Yes.
I may be wrong.
Well, that's what you said. That's all it meant.
And by the way, I'm adverse to reply all, so otherwise I would have done that.
Or you can just send it, just so I, or
Yeah.
Nick can send it to me, just so, because we're gonna kind of compile a summary. I didn't realize everybody was preparing ahead, but that's good. I'm happy
Yes.
we're all prepared ahead.
That's right. And I'm gonna skip Dennis's for now, and then, Bob, you wanna talk about what your points were?
Firewalls of,
That's why I handed it back to you.
in order to grease the wheels for private sector developers to build housing, out, money is always a factor. So money from CHFA and or tax increment financing is not likely to make an impact on the size of the projects that Old Saybrook can accommodate, and enticement of builders to build missing middle housing in Old Saybrook is the way to go. But CHFA doesn't handle stuff at that small scale. And tax increment financing, as Cora Fortuna mentioned, which is like 2 years ago, 2023, they were up to somewhere between $75,000 and $100,000, and that's not enough. So the dollars aren't there to do what Old Saybrook can do. That's number one and number four rolled together. But as for what can be done, the transit-oriented communities or transit-oriented development, the term is morphing. They emphasize proximity to the train station. And to me, that's okay on this side of the railroad tracks, but it's dumb on the other side. There's a cemetery over there, industrial properties. The cemetery itself is more than a half-mile walk from the train station, past CBS, over the bridge, into the traffic light, and then turn to go between Mystic Market and where the sheds were displayed. It's more than half a mile, so it's not within the walking distance that transit-oriented development recommends. So let's focus on the side where it can make a difference. On Lynn Street, where the most recently constructed and soon to be leased apartments at the corner of Lynn Street and Elm Street, 8-30G, that one corner building is technically within a half mile of the train station, but the others closer to Doro and TJ's Pizza, those are again beyond the half-mile walk. But that's still a great location because you can walk to food, grocery store, shopping center, and you can walk to Main Street. So that's the kind of location that Old Saybrook knows will work for housing, much more so than an arbitrary and capricious half mile to the train station. That also includes the I-95 interchange, and it goes out to the big lot across from Mystic Market, somewhere between 14 and 16 acres. That's got a lot of wetlands. So that's not suitable. So we should focus on where it would work. And then with regard to Rivercog and input from Megan and the plans, she showed us great plans for housing, especially at the shopping center property. But the two key things that will make or break any housing concept are the property owner has to wish to be involved and to do it. And the soils have to support the septic to the capacity that the housing demands. Those two things have to be satisfied. And that's why I'm glad to see, even in the most recent grant announcement that Chris made, that task number one has to do with soils capacity. That's, in Old Saybrook, that's the ticket. There was an article in the Connecticut Examiner about a bill in the state legislature requiring that towns build central sewer systems. Well, good luck with that. That would be $100 million and 10 years down the road, while in the meantime, nothing changes with regard to housing. So I'd rather see $10 million go towards housing in the near term future rather than wait for central sewage treatment plant if it could ever happen, that would also serve Westbrook and Clinton. We went through that a long time ago, when that referendum was more than 20 years ago, right? So I'm not certain that the feelings toward a central sewer system have changed that much for the residents of Old Saybrook. You flush it, you own it. That's still the way it works here. And there's a lot of factors involved that are beyond our control, and they're not getting better. Lumber, cabinets, furniture, construction costs, labor costs, infrastructure, everything rolls into negative pressure on the possibility of home ownership and for developers to make enough profit to build the smaller scale projects. So included in my recommendations, that comes next, right? That's maybe a land bank where some entity other than the private sector owns the land and promotes housing to be built, so the developer doesn't have to face the cost of building the infrastructure of road to a development and purchase the land. And maybe that would be an interesting way to go. So I think those are the things that I have. Megan, I see RiverCog in the future as being a county government level operation. The state is gonna make you the county government that we don't have in Connecticut.
I think they're already trying.
If we operate together, we can make things work for the RiverCog towns, including Cromwell, with which I don't know that we have much in common.
No, they're.
We are.
Same with Middletown. And so is Haddam, yeah, East Haddam.
Essex.
Yeah. They're out there. You know. Anyways, then the beach communities in Old Lyme are being forced to go to hook up to New London, I believe, or East Lyme. So, yeah, they're eventually just very expensive. So with that, I guess it's gone to what are. Yes, Paul, yeah,
I haven't given my problems.
no, that's where we're going next.
Oh, okay, sorry, I said.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
So why don't you start? What's your problem?
Well, I guess my first problem is that if we focus on apartment buildings, we're attracting a transient population, and I don't know that our town really wants to support that. We really want people who will live here, start our homes, families who will put down roots, if you will, will be invested in the community, will volunteer for the different clubs and be a part and enjoy the community. So I think that's also part of our plan of conservation and development to support vitality and sustainability in the community. So, and then the other obvious things are, I mean, I'm still in a water emergency as far as Connecticut water. I mean, we haven't had rain in a very long time, and I just find myself thinking here, we're talking about building more. So I think actually at this point, I'd like to hear somebody from the water company talk about what are the constraints that they see going forward? What kind of development could this area realistically support? And then the third thing is I do continuously hear from people in the community who are not necessarily interested in it becoming more dense. I mean, they like the community the way it is. So we want to be aware that we want to include the community in any choices that we make along those lines. And then the usual, the septic is a perpetual problem. And I think that's the land availability. And then lastly, Connecticut is one of 7 states that has a population that has declined every year since 2016, which we're aware of. So again, why, perhaps we should be taking a hard look as to whether this is really the locale to, and how much density this area ought to absorb. And there aren't really jobs that are crying for people. So again, I think there has to be there obviously is a top-down pressure on us to build. But also, I think we should, with cool heads, look at the realities of the situation, including in environmental constraints with all the inland wetlands. And anyway, so that I went through my whole laundry list of considerations, if you will. Thank you.
So I'm just gonna interrupt for a minute for anybody online. Karen was able to talk to Attorney Loam, who is not gonna be able to be here tonight. So they're requesting to continue, which is a little bit of a dilemma. Because on October 15th, it started as a joint meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. But now, at 6 o'clock, we have the kickoff for the presentation. It would be a land use committee meeting. So that would push that.
I spoke to him about the next meeting probably being in the beginning of November.
Okay.
They were expecting this to take a few months versus so soon.
Oh, okay.
So he's fine with doing it at the next November meeting or even potentially farther out.
So then we would continue the matter to the November 5th meeting of the Planning Commission, which I'm going to assume he's going to want to. November 3rd would be the zoning, the first night of the hearing. So I'm assuming that would get postponed as well. So for the Planning Commission, the next review of the 2 petitions to amend the maps. I don't know, maybe you should say this is the chairman for Mill Rock Road LLC to continue them to the November 5th Planning Commission meeting.
Yep. So. Let's vote on this, right?
Probably just make a motion
Thank you.
on both
I'd like to make a motion,
62, 64, and 66.
make a motion that we continue the application for the zoning map change on properties 62 and 64 and 66 River Street until the November 5th meeting of the Planning Commission.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Thank you.
So back to the housing task force.
Yeah. Gotta-
I didn't want anybody online who was waiting for
Right.
that.
If anyone was waiting for the zoning map change discussion, that's gonna be moved to November 5th. So if you want to drop off, feel free. Otherwise, you can continue to listen to us talk about housing. Megan, what do you see as the big problems?
So I approached this a little bit differently. I approached it as what do we do? Because I kind of listed some of my problems in the previous one. So should I just go ahead with that?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's kind of how to address problems. So maybe I just rephrase. I don't think that we have a great idea right now as to where we want to see housing intensify versus not, other than what Bob has already said about the areas that make sense near the train station. So I think the first thing is us as a group looking at a map and figuring out where generally, roughly speaking, those areas are, probably using survey responses to help us figure that out and make sure that what we're doing is tracking with what people are thinking. The other thing is, if we knew where those areas were, I don't know if we know that the zoning in those areas match our intent for those areas per our POCD. And so I think that a thing to do would be to check the zoning in the areas that we're saying make sense for more housing and see if the zoning is aligned with those intentions. And then I think these things would kind of have to work in tandem. But I think you would have to look at feasibility because we don't know necessarily, kind of similar to what the DOH grant is for. We don't know exactly what the septic capacity is on that site, those sites, whatever they are. We're not quite sure yet. We're not necessarily sure what parking requirements are necessary, and we know that parking is very expensive with no ROI, and it takes up valuable space. So I think those things, plus like a market feasibility, return on investment sort of study to understand what a developer would need in order to turn a profit building on that site, and then working with the zoning commission to make sure that the regulations match the things that will incentivize development within those parameters. And also maybe working with the public, to Paula's point, involving them in the process. Once we know what the areas are, maybe working one at a time as we're going through these feasibility things, maybe doing sort of a specific plan or a master plan with the community, similar to what was done for Mariner's Way, having a lot of public conversations and visioning and creating a product that can then be marketed out to developers to say, this is what we want here. Generally, the regulations are there, the feasibility studies are done, there's a picture painted, the public is on board. Tell us what you got. So those are my key issues and also solutions, because we like to keep it positive.
Thank you.
I kind of took a similar approach to maybe kind of combining my problems and actions here, so I'll sort of go through them. I mean, one thing I think the big problem is that like 830G doesn't really give us affordable housing. It's kind of, I think a lot of developers sort of see it as like it's a last resort, because it lets them kind of do whatever they want, where they want. And like, I think we'd be better off focusing on, like, from a zoning perspective, let's create the zoning regulations and a framework that makes it easy for developers to build the things that we want them to build in the places we want them to build. I think if given a choice, they would prefer not to use 830G if they could get more money out of a given property otherwise. So some of the things I kind of looked at was, you know, like in the transit oriented area, like, are there ways that maybe we could, you know, enable things like cluster lots or, you know, more sort of smaller homes in those to kind of consolidate things. I know I thought, like, should we, you know, allow like the accessory or mixed use, you know, developments for not just B1, but maybe every business district? So at least anywhere that's a pedestrian node, so up and down Route 1, or even, you know, maybe not just half a mile, but maybe a mile or two from the train station, places where it might make sense. But make it like a permitted use for the property, not a special exception. Again, that puts friction on the developers and gives them a reason to say, I don't want to do it. It's like more application process they have to go through. I also think we should look at, you know, maybe allowing, you know, more multi-unit conversions, taking single family homes and putting them into 2 and 4. We allow it, but it's like the special exception, it's only properties that are built before 1944. If we allow that and all residential areas, or maybe only within sort of a TOD radius, that could give, you know, new families an opportunity to maybe start with homeowners, say buy a home, convert it into a duplex, rent out half of it. Now it's a lot easier to pay your mortgage, and they've created a second sort of unit there. And if it's already a 4-bedroom house and now it's 2 2-bedroom units, we're not creating extra septic needs on the town. We're not necessarily creating extra water needs. You know, we would figure out how the parking work there. But I think that could open up more opportunities. And it's not putting the focus on large developments, large apartment buildings, making more kind of citizen developers, more opportunities for smaller developers to kind of get involved here. And somebody just asked, you know, just like short-term rentals. I don't think we learned how much of an impact that even is. So I know that was on my list of things to consider here. But is that something that, you know, maybe we allow them in only certain areas of town? I don't know how much capacity is actually taking off the market here, but. And then just from a funding standpoint, you kind of brought it up with like the funding here. And like I was, you know, wondering, like, are there creative, you know, financing programs, either as a town or land bank, or working with things to maybe help subsidize, like, you know, building ADUs or doing some of these 2-bedroom conversions? Maybe the town has some stake in it. Like I've heard of some cities using TIFs, where basically because you're doing conversion can increase the property value. The city would actually borrow money, you know, to put down a down payment to build it based on that future tax revenue. So if we know your project is going to go up over the next 20 years, or the town can borrow that as a TIF, use that to give to the developer to build or do that construction, and then that gives us more units. It pays for it. You know, everybody kind of comes out. So I think more kind of creative financing to enable non-large developers to do things.
Okay. Like, Chuck, I'll let you speak for yourself this time.
That's fine, put words in my mouth. I took a more simplistic approach to answering your questions than I think all the details that have come. I just listened to when we talked about the fire hose of ideas down at the end of the table here. And everybody's got excellent details, but I want to come back to this, the what, the or else issue, which seems to me to be the elephant in the room from the get-go for me. I have to admit to have not read carefully whatever statutory language exists that perhaps forces municipalities to create or obtain affordable housing. So I guess my question still is out there. It's an important one, I think, is or what happens? I think you told me at one point that you don't get to apply for some consideration of grants or something else. Am I wrong about that? You can't qualify, if you don't meet the test of whatever percentage of affordable housing you should have in your community. So what happens?
So if you don't have 10% of your housing stock deed restricted. And it is kind of a so what, I think in some ways, 830G, which is the affordable housing regulations. Someone could come into an industrial zone, a business zone, any zone that doesn't allow for housing. 830G would come in and say, well, I could take your prime industrial property and cram a bunch of units in there. But my experience with our boards and commissions over the past almost 25 years now is that 830G is not a scary tool. We've had nice developments. The towns look for developments as long as, so you can only deny an 830G for public health and safety. So the goal where it's this, you get to the 10% and you deed restrict these units depending on the tool. And we also have incentives housing, which is another tool. There's different, it could be 40 years, it could be 20 years, depending on that tool. You're kind of in a makeup game, and and Bob and I have talked about it for years, is if you have 1,000 units and 10% of them are supposed to be affordable, you're already down 100 to meet your 10%. So you build 10 more and you get 3 of those, you still have to accommodate that existing 100 from your original 1,000. So you're always playing this catch up with the 10%, which it's not achievable because even the units at the end of Main Street are slowly, it doesn't seem like it, but they're 15 years old now, they're slowly gonna drop off. So I think the boards and commissions have kind of taken the position, well, we're not out for this, what if with the 10%? Because we're at like 1 or 2%, even trying to get new units in. But affordable housing, I mean, we're required to have, affordable housing. And if we, to meet that 10%, that's the goal, I guess we should say, is to have 10% of the housing stock deed restricted is affordable. But it's almost unachievable because we don't have nice flat land with sewers and public water and, fire protection and all of the things that, maybe it would work in a city. So even if we really try to obtain, to get to that 10% very quickly, now you talk about the things you talked about tonight, the cost of construction, where do you build it? We have a lot of wetlands constraints. We have flood zones, so that's kind of the summary, if that helps.
Yeah, summary is, I guess I would regard it as intractable or semi-negative. If you take the kind of libertarian approach to let nature take its course, then things will sort of galump along the way they've been going along. If you want to get proactive, I think some of the answers to the questionnaire that's out there might help. I came up with 3 action items, which we've already heard. So I kind of guessed what other people are saying. only my sentences are 5 words long. They aren't detailed. So I put down, identify exactly what land could be developed.
Right.
I've heard that from 3 places now tonight. Identify exactly what existing housing or habitable space could be used for affordable housing. This is sort of along the conversion lines.
Yeah, well, even the conversion wouldn't necessarily result in affordable. I think that's some of the challenge with 830G is like, if we take a house and split it into 2, they're more affordable for people, but they're not, if they're not deed restricted, then we don't get credit for them under certain programs.
So I have no detailed experience, but I did write in the sort of what I've learned is, it's not clear to me, I'm reading what I wrote, that the provisions of 8-30G would result in something bad. I think
So-
Chris is just,
May I
We just-
also remind you that we are a housing task force, not only affordable housing, and that actually affordable housing doesn't really mean only affordable. It is not counting any of the naturally occurring affordable housing, which is a big disappointment. I wish that could be changed, but anyway.
Well, I do kind of on
But
Paula's,
just
but on Paula's point, you can kind of circle back to what Chuck was saying. We get hung up on affordable housing is 830G. And affordable housing, when you do the math, we've seen the math, we have developments, affordable housing isn't really affordable when you base it on, median incomes of $120,000 or $140,000. So it's really even, the thought of taking our affordable housing plan and calling it a housing plan, it's just not affordable housing. It kind of pushes it away from the 830G or something that's deed restricted affordable. Because deed restricted affordable at 80% is not gonna help the person making minimum wage who's not making over $100,000. So how do you create more housing? It could be naturally occurring in different ways that works for the developer and works for what the community is looking for. I think that's kind of where we're going. But we always get stuck on, and I wish Kathy was here, because she's like, it always goes back to affordable housing. It's like, why are we being forced to do this? Why? And it's not necessarily being forced to. There's a problem where we don't have middle, starter homes, we don't have middle income homes or workforce housing. It's not just affordable. And I think that's part of the task force, which when 5 years ago, when they required the towns to have an affordable housing plan, that's how it started, but I think it's more, and I think this committee has talked about it over and over again. It's not just about incentive housing zone or 830G or deed restricted. In the past year, you've learned how many kids are at the bus stop on Husky. You've learned how many
Right.
people are on SNAP. You've heard all different things that are going on, homelessness. So it's how do you get people into homes that are not necessarily affordable because it's, we're being forced to do it. I think this committee is looking at solutions to fit the community that includes affordable housing. Does that help or?
Yes. I think
Two things. One, the state does not officially have a target. They use the 10% as a guideline for when 8-30G is no longer a tool for a developer to come to a municipality and disregard the zoning regulations. It's not a target. So the state really doesn't have a target today. When HB 5002 was under consideration, there were parts in there that had used the term fair share, and they allocated housing to various municipalities around the state. Those numbers would have been a target, but the governor vetoed that bill. So right now, we don't have a specific numerical target. That's one. The other thing, question that I would ask, if the floodgates were open and you could build 100 new dwelling units in Old Saybrook, would it have an impact on the cost of housing in Old Saybrook? I predict no, it would not. They would all end up, every rental would end up renting for the same as it is today. And so where is that number? If you build 500 new dwelling units in Old Saybrook, and that's like 10% of our total number of dwelling units, would 500 make a difference in the cost of housing in Old Saybrook? Maybe. And so we're looking at, to have a supply number impact the cost of housing simply from supply and demand, we'd have to increase our housing units in Connecticut, in Old Saybrook, Connecticut, by about 10% or more. And I don't think that's realistic. So it's not just supply is the answer. It has to have the affordability component as a part of that. And where the magic number is on that, is it 30% like 8-30G, 20% like IHZ, or some version that Old Saybrook could write for itself? But to write it as 10%, which people think of as a target from the state or otherwise, that doesn't increase your total percentage of affordable housing. You won't get there. You can do the math and the great algebra exercise for some middle schooler, but that's not gonna get you there. 10% won't do it.
Well, the other thing too is as these houses fall off or rentals. So some of these rentals right now are more than people pay for a mortgage. It's how to, taking 830G and affordable is like what we're required or supposed to do, take all of that out. How do you keep rents low and stable long-term? I think is a question, despite, this statute, that statute, this is pushing you to do something. Because the 830G units, we're getting 60s and 80s, we're not getting 40 and 30%. That's really gonna help the people that need it. And to Bob's point, we could build more housing and we could build and increase the supply, but when we're selling the houses for $1 million each, and they should be really $500,000 each, it's not helping starting homes and starting families.
Well, I think Paul's point about, we don't necessarily want more apartments, we want people who can, I think we want more home ownership opportunities too. And could that be more condos, or, you can do a condo as a duplex or some.
Yeah.
And even like, splitting a house, duplex, if you're owning half of it and renting half, that's still creating a home ownership opportunity for any family who couldn't buy that as a single family house, but they can buy it if they can rent half of it.
And if we can increase those numbers, you will drive the rent down
Over time,
yeah.
I-
You're seeing it now. You're getting, sorry, Megan. You're seeing the rents in the apartment buildings are staying high. But when you're looking at a rent of a house or something like that, those are starting to come down. Because if someone's gonna spend $3,000, I might as well go live in a complex. Because it's got amenities. If I gotta rent a house for $3,000, I gotta cut the lawn, I gotta shovel the snow, it's still my responsibility. So that's driving the rents down in housing.
And I wouldn't always say that homeownership is cheaper either. If we're looking at affordability, I'm a homeowner and everything around my house breaks.
Right,
Like,
well, that's all, Yeah.
sometimes it's easier to just get the lease as opposed to own the car, right?
absolutely.
So, I think still having the option for apartments and more inventory, just at every level,
Yes,
apartments, single family, two families, whatever they are. More options, I think, are just better so that we have more fluidity throughout the whole marketplace, right? Like you want people to be able to move in and out of these things so that, they have flexibility, right? And I think that's part of Saybrook's charm is people come experience it and then, if they stay short term, they stay short term, but, having more of those options, I think does help everybody at every
Right.
level. So.
And I think if you mix it, as opposed to focusing on larger complexes, focusing more on duplexes and triplexes, I think that is gonna be a little bit more palatable to the population in town.
And the septic systems.
And the septic systems. But Megan, you had a point.
Everything is the limiting factor for
Yeah.
everything is septic, so let's start there and what's realistic for what our town can accommodate. Everything's gonna be dictated by the soils and the septic.
Right.
And so.
But we need to know that before we.
Right.
And start to get with Megan.
You guys kind of touched on it, but it was about apartments, and I kind of want to push back on the idea that people who live in apartments are inherently transient residents, right? If we're talking about people at all life stages, a lot of people, even into their 30s, even into their 40s nowadays are renting for longer. A lot of that has to do with the cost of a down payment, but I'll say that I moved to Connecticut from out of state. And the reason I settled in Old Saybrook was because there was a nice apartment complex, because I wasn't from the area. I didn't know where I wanted to permanently settle. I didn't yet have a down payment. I now live in Old Saybrook. I'm volunteering my time in Old Saybrook. My kids are in school in Old Saybrook, and I own a home in Old Saybrook because there was an apartment here for me to move into when I moved from out of state. My mom owns a home. She's looking for an apartment because she no longer wants the maintenance for her home and she lives alone. So now, as an end stage of life, she's looking to move into an apartment also in an area where she was already living. So I think thinking about that full life cycle, just because you rent doesn't mean that you're not going to be committed to the community. I was volunteering in Old Saybrook even from the apartment complex.
Yeah, there's a lot of kids that, in the high schools or in the middle schools that live in these, in
Absolutely.
that community. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the whole reason it's there, right? So.
And that's the senior plus, my parents just did that, they sold their house and moved into an apartment, that's, it's like a duplex apartment, they're in the same city, they didn't wanna leave the city, they didn't wanna leave their
Right.
community.
Right. But you have to make those opportunities,
Yeah.
and I think to Megan's point is it's good to have a mix and have some apartments, so these tenants said. But we gotta consider. I'm good, not at all, I won't go there, yeah.
But a mix kind of gets like, I don't know, Megan, something you know, and this is there like a recommended mix of like, what is the percentage of homes versus apartments versus duplex multi-family that would, it is it more appropriate for a town of this size? Like, what, should we set a target? Should that be kind of the goal of a plan? Like,
I think it depends on what lens you're looking through and what targets you're aiming for. Like who are you looking to house in your community? What mixture of age groups are you looking to attract? That kind of a thing. And also like tax-based considerations, things like that. Fiscal lenses versus social lenses, I think would be different, which is a really fancy way of saying I don't know.
But I think, like CHFA, their resources are for bigger complexes.
Yeah.
I think the state needs to work on incentives for people to convert their single family home to a 2 or 3 family. To make it affordable to buy. So if I could sell to, a young family that wants to buy a home, that they can convert it to a 2 or 3 family and offset their mortgage, that's a big bonus. But we don't have any programs like that. And that's where we need. It's great, the state can set all its mandates it wants. But if they're not gonna fund them, what good are they? And they don't really do a good job at funding this unless you do 830G. And there's just so much of that you can build. We don't have the land for it.
Well, the other thing to think about too is even if they were funded, people could buy 3 and 4 family houses and Airbnb all 4 units. So how does that help? You're in a beach community or closer to a beach area, you're renting them out. And one of the other things that I think Megan said, it's kind of impossible to answer this question. The other thing is we have people in this town who own 2nd and 3rd and possibly 4th homes when they talk about my old Saybrook house, this house, that house. So you kind of look at the population and the number of houses. You've got people who own multiple houses, people who, come here for certain times of the year. You've got the Airbnb thing going on. So it's not like we can say the population is 10,000 and we have 3,000 houses. We need to build X amount more because those houses are being used or some of them, are not being used at all.
Right.
I mean, do we have data that show like this from the Airbnb or like these are like unoccupied home? Do we have actual good data or is it more just like anecdotal?
We're saying, we throw Airbnb around.
Yeah.
Okay, but what about the person that rents out their home weekly and doesn't use Airbnb?
I was,
I mean,
so that short term, like, well, yeah.
Yeah. That's,
To me, it's the,
so it's the short-term rental.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, the short term also implies, I think, again, if it's a year round thing, I think it's different, but you know. I'll say my folks, you know, they live here off season. They
Right.
love, they come here to visit the kids and the
Sure.
family and they live here for 6 months. Off season, they rent it out during the summer to help with the expenses, but their intent is to come back and use the home at some point. They're just gap filling.
right,
They're providing a service.
there's a lot of people that do
Yeah,
that.
and then there's an economic benefit to the
Right.
town as well.
And-
And I'm not saying it's bad, I
Right,
think we have a lot of the beach communities and families who've been
Yeah.
here for hundreds of years. And
I know.
I should stop using Airbnb and short-term rental, or because it was years ago. You drive down to the shore, go up and down the streets in November.
Yeah.
Hoping to see somebody with a for rent sign in the window, and that's how those families, every year, they closed up for the season and put it up there. And that's a huge
And-
part of our community as well.
That's a huge part of our.
As is the academic rental off season, right?
That's a huge part of our economy,
Yeah.
and what we've seen over the years, is growing up here, when I was younger. The town didn't just triple in size, it went to 50 and 60,000 people, because more of the homes were being rented weekly than are today, because a lot of people have bought them as second homes. And have the means and don't have to rent. So that's where we lose part of our housing. And I would want to stay away from developing any type of, you know, multifamily homes out of the beach communities, because I don't think they can really support it. Because the land's really not there for septic.
Well, I mean, it could work for redevelopment. I mean, we do have multifamily, it's, you know, and that's the whole thing, and it's, we can create all kinds of regulations and I sent you the details of this grant, which kind of Megan and I, and I talked a little about, we started talking about the affordable housing plan and things with the region, and she said, you know, the region can help, and then the next thing you know, we're off and running with Ben Lovejoy from DOH. And he said, well, you know, we have more resources, you know, you can ask for a grant, so the grant, and it was put together kind of in a short time frame. And he said, well, if you can get something in kind of quick, so we have our mixed use regulations for apartments, we really haven't had a lot of takers.
Yeah.
We've been promoting, you know, more residential and mixed use in this area. We have a section by the train station in the B2, which is kind of underutilized. So the thought was, okay, well, why are the regulations not working? And going back to some of your points, soils. And another thing I think is, I know we're in a world where, is someone called them, the higher ups are saying, well, we don't need parking. But there's a push to eliminate parking regulations, but for the most part, if someone is in an apartment or a mixed use development, you know, say on Main Street in the B1, the likelihood that they're gonna walk to Walmart to do their family shopping for the week is probably unlikely. There's gonna be some type of a car in that family for the most part. So is it, you know, parking, what's out there, soils. And that's how this started. It started with B1, Megan and Rivercog kind of said they would support it, and the next thing you know, it went from, I think it was 60 or 70,000 to begin with, and I said, well, what if we add the B2? And they said, oh, well, you've got this, we'll go for the next part. DOH has been great, and now we're 97,000 into it. So for your next meeting, it was gonna be a kickoff meeting, just to talk about an input. And I think the thing is, I know a lot of this stuff is kind of happens, but it's important with Thrive. It's important, with this land use meeting. We have another SS4, which it's a regional plan, is getting the input in. And I know we have a lot of meetings, but overall, even with the regional plans, it's your plan, it's our plan, and I know we're different than Cromwell and we're different than Middletown, but there's segments and you'll see it's, at this meeting, this SS4 plan, Safe Streets for All, and I'm kind of jumping into staff report. But there's sections of Old Saybrook that, due to crash analysis and so forth, this plan shows some significant changes that you're gonna say, because I'll be honest, I looked at it and I was like, wow, that's a change, and this is where your input is needed, so. DOH, that, I think that's gonna be an exciting project, at least it kind of falls within the parameters as well as. And I keep wanting to call it murder. Now I'm saying murder. The CMDA, and the hope is that, we can start going and getting some of these things from, your action plan. And I guess I'm kind of jumping all over, but I'm just gonna kind of roll into this. We've been going through your actions slowly. Some of the actions that on this affordable housing plan to be our new housing plan have changed, like establishing municipal housing task force. Initially, that was to be done through town staff, which didn't make sense, so now it's this commission, which I think is terrific. Promote ADUs, changes to ADUs. Some of these things have happened in the past 4 years. And we're at a point where we need to redo the housing plan. So the one thing, I guess I kind of made some assumptions because this plan is so new. And we've used John Guskowski and the Tyke Consulting Group for the plan of development. And they just did this plan 3 years ago. It seemed to make sense. And we talked about it just to contact John to go through and work with us to get this updated and developed and adopted again by July. There was some questions that have come up as to would we want to get another consultant and go out to bid for this plan? I never asked the question, so I'm asking the question now. There are a lot of great consultants. This is a 5-year plan. We're 4 years in. I think we're gonna have a lot to add, but I think practically a 5-year plan, you really can't get much done, like the natural hazard mitigation plan. I remember Mike going, but how are we gonna get all of this done in 5 years? And I'm like, we're not. And we're back at a point of going through and updating it. So the question I have for the commission is, do you want to work with John and Tyke again and get this updated and keep plugging away? Do you want me to put an RFP out and go out to bid? That's really up to you. My opinion, and I guess I kind of assumed, was we just got started on it. Or do we want to reinvent the wheel at this point? In my feeling was that your feeling was you wanted to jump into actions versus starting over. So I'm just going to bring that question to you at this point. Do you want to use Tyke, or do you want me to do an RFP and we can look for a different consultant?
Thoughts on that?
One thing that I will say is that we don't know what might come out of special session and if there's going to be new requirements for the 830J plans and what they're going to look like.
But we
So-
still kind of do, but at some point, we still have to address what we have on the books. And I mean, I have
Yeah.
talked to John and other folks, it could change. But revisiting the plan in one way or the other, I think we're gonna have to revisit it, maybe if it becomes a 10-year plan, but maybe we also need to revisit what's in here.
Yeah, I guess what I meant was we might not have a choice about reinventing the wheel. We might have to reinvent the wheel because they're reinventing it for us.
Well, obviously, we have to take that into consideration.
I guess with that being, it would make more sense to not make a decision on hiring someone until after we know what comes out? So where you going with that, Megan? Or-
I wasn't really going any particular way other than to throw it out there.
No, it's a good consideration.
Is there any cost involved in putting out an RFP to get responses and see examples of different, perhaps a couple of different consultants,
No, it's just gonna be more
more reading?
time, which is fine. I suspect it'll probably, I mean, I could be wrong, it'll probably be more money. Because whoever, I mean, if we do get a new consultant,
Yeah,
it's
but
meeting all of you again, learning the town potentially, if it's someone. The one thing I will say is that my experience lately with consultants, we've had a good experience with Tyke. We have 2 other consulting firms that we were over a year and a half behind in deadlines and so forth, so. I will
well, it
say
doesn't
they've,
preclude us.
no, it doesn't,
Yeah,
it doesn't.
okay, okay. But I like the idea of, I mean, I don't know how soon the special session would be all over, but if that is a real game changer, then maybe we would be advised to wait, although actually sending out an RFP, I guess, doesn't have anything to do with
No.
the substance.
Do we know what's being discussed?
It could change completely, it could
Yeah.
change,
Yeah,
we really
fine.
don't know, but the thing is, I think anybody, if we did do an RFP, this is all gonna come up, we know it's kinda looming.
Right.
Whether it happens or what happens,
It's gonna have to be addressed either way.
Right.
So,
and I mean, I don't think we would dive into, we still have to get, funding, things like that in place for this, there is subject to change.
There might, oh, sorry.
go ahead.
There might be substantially more work involved. Like Chris said, the drafts keep changing. I haven't ever seen a completed draft, but I've seen snippets of different things that are constantly changing. There might be significantly more work involved, which might mean any RFP that went out, anything that you got back, any estimates might be off, depending on what they're based on. For what it's worth, Rivercog did a couple of housing plans for the towns last go around, and we're not touching anything until we know it comes out. But I think we should know by the end of October.
So, well, I guess the one thing is, I know that's looming, we still have to go through and would have to do the RFP, whatever else we understand, I mean, I understand that that's happening. But I mean,
The only problem.
I kind of think, so we just table the whole thing and stop. And not take a look at what we have because this session.
I guess I'm struggling to understand, even if they change it drastically, how does that affect this plan? Because the plan is about housing, the plan is about, I mean.
The requirements.
Requirements for more.
Like build out analyses possibly, or location identifying, or identifying areas in zoning regulations that you plan to change. So just like more content, but more specific content related to housing that will require more analyses, possibly, or possibly not.
Is that an addendum to if?
Well, I guess the thing is, and I mean, I totally understand that the requirement of it would change. I'm not saying like, let's finish this cover to cover. We need to revisit it no matter what type of a plan
Exactly.
that it is.
Mhm.
And I think we are kind of doing things that we may have analysis and things that will fall into place that will check the box. We may have to go through and just kind of say, this is what we're thinking, basically, to start and then look at that. But overall, I think we still need to look at our action items, we still need to look at the content. I mean, this board was not in existence
Mhm.
when this was written.
Right.
So it's, I mean, I totally understand what you're saying, it could be a totally different plan. And I mean, we could do that too, we could just kind of take it and shelf it.
I don't see the point of doing that.
No.
Because especially if we're talking, if anything happens, it's gonna be the end of October.
Mm. Yeah, my thought was just cost wise, if we're talking about consultants and RFPs and setting aside money, my thought was that the cost to do the work for a consultant would change depending on what the requirements are. That's where I was going with that.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. But as far as going out to RFP, while it can be a useful exercise, right now, I think it's a waste of land use's time to write the RFP and to vet them and do all that. We have a plan. It's okay. We've laid out a way of updating it. We've talked about all this stuff. I think we all know we need to start identifying plots where we can do any kind of housing development. And then we're gonna have to do some kind of analysis on it. So I think bringing in a new consultant would muddy the works. That's just my opinion.
Megan, in your experience, when you hire a new consultant, do they typically want to start from cover to cover and from scratch, kind of taking aside what may or may not happen in the session as far as the content? Or are they just gonna kind of go with something someone else had? I'm just thinking about cost.
It depends on how much I tell them I liked what I already had. So if I say this is what I like, but if you're going that way, if you already really like what you have, and the consultant that did that work is available and willing to do the work again, then I don't see why you would bring in a new consultant for it.
Well, I
It's
mean, I
on-
suspect, and this is just my gut feeling, is someone who's gonna start over cover to cover is gonna wanna rebrand it, redo it, change the formatting. And that was some of the thought of staying with Tyke because we have something, it may not be everything we want right now. If we put aside what could happen in October, but we can,
See, to me, we have a starting point that we can blend now to look at housing as in total as opposed to just affordable housing. Okay,
Mhm.
and we adjust it that way, and if we use Tyke, it's gonna be cheaper than if we hire someone outside, someone new. And that saves us money, so when we know what comes out of special session, now it's probably gonna cost us what it would cost for the consultant to put together the new plan. As opposed to that plus. That makes sense? Did that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, we worked with them to do the whole plan of conservation development. So we looked at some of this housing stuff in 21, we looked at it again
Yeah.
in like 23. Now we're looking at it again just 2 years later. So, I mean, he's got the knowledge and sort of the history of how we got to where we are. So I think your point, like, that's, even if everything changes in session, it's still probably gonna be cheaper and less effort for him to do it than for anybody else to do it.
Correct.
And I didn't have any problems working with him.
No, I.
He seems confident in what he's doing, that's what's most important.
Yes. So,
And that's what's like significantly better and significantly cheaper option out there that we would expect to get.
Yeah.
Which is unrealistic, I'm assuming.
well, we could ask for it in Word format, throw it through chat GPT, get it redone.
yeah,
Probably wouldn't understand any of it, but
I'm sure there's towns out there that.
I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are. Anybody else have feeling one way or the other?
I sent to everyone the chat GPT results I got from my prompt of how does a town without central sewers increase housing density?
Yeah.
And it found it very interesting that artificial intelligence gave this as a response.
Yeah.
So at this point, I would recommend, make up your own prompt and try, it's free. chatgpt.com and follow the link, the clickbait for doing it for free. And you get to ask like 3 or 4 questions before they ask you to register or whatever. So put in your own prompt and you'd be surprised what you get. It doesn't mean it's gospel or it's
No.
useful, but it's interesting. I will
So-
say.
And it does give citations where it's pulling the information from, which I find fascinating. That it's actually citing where it's getting the information from, so you can follow up. I mean, I use Microsoft Copilot almost daily, so.
Bob, can you summarize in a sentence or two, can you summarize what GPT told you about the sewers? Could you summarize for me?
So,
Summarize what its recommendations, like what its ideas.
So-
are.
Can
Or
we
is it too
before-
complicated?
It's,
Or is it
It's a lot.
pages? Oh, okay.
It's all okay.
Yeah,
You emailed this out
it's
to us.
13 pages long.
It doesn't say
No.
forget it or go
No.
ahead or,
No.
okay.
Read
So-
Bob's
so
document, it's a
kinda-
lot easier to understand.
trying to
Yeah, we need to.
put you back into
Yeah.
this,
And
I'm
today,
looking-
Wednesday, the
Bob,
Desegregate Connecticut outfit that's out there, an advocate for increased housing, have a list of recommended articles. One from the Pew Charitable Trust was Principles for Enhancing Housing Availability and Affordability. And this is right on, this is what we're doing. We're already deep into their recommendations. So we're on the right track. But Desegregate Connecticut has a more ambitious
Yeah.
goal than we are handling now. So I took this as a real positive that Pew Charitable Trust.
so Bob, so going back to our discussion, we're talking about, do we stick with Tyke to update our housing plan? We know things may change in the session,
Yeah.
or do we wanna go through and go out for an RFP
Yeah.
to see if we can find someone else? So I'm trying to get a feeling from the housing task force. Do we stick with Tyke, who did our first plan and the plan of development? Or do we wanna go out to bid?
We're trying to do housing. It's affordable, that's great. More housing is also good, could be better. And with the affordable housing plan, we, in particular, I know the zoning commission has not completed everything in the table. So missing middle housing should be more available for developers, property owners, and, yeah.
So taking the content out of this. The plan was to take this affordable housing plan
Yeah,
and make it into a housing plan because our 5 years is up.
yeah,
But the suggestion came out that maybe at year 4 here, we should get a new consultant and start over with this. And we have an RFP, so we're trying to determine right now if we just want to continue with Tyke, deal with what comes out of the session and use them as our consultant. Or if we want to go for an RFP and kind of start over cover to cover. That's where we are with the discussion.
yeah. So how do we go about getting there? It's, I mean, what's the nut? What do we do to move forward?
So do we get a new consultant or continue the way we are? What's your thought? Mike, maybe you
Yeah.
can kind of explain.
Guys, basically, we wanna keep going with like Tyke the consultant or hire.
Well, yeah, John
Yeah,
Guzkowski and him, yeah, and if we,
the question is bringing somebody new or keep going with John.
no, we have to update this next
Yeah.
year anyway, so it's what do we make, how do we make it more concrete so that something will happen?
So
That's where I'm coming from.
So the questions come up. Do we not use John and go out to bid and start over?
I don't think we need to use John and these guys here. I think we can.
Or do
can
we
get-
wanna
We can
update
get
it?
80% there and have somebody look it over and give us a yes, or change this kind of thing.
No, we're gonna use a consultant. Do we continue or start with a new one is the question.
Well, actually,
Sorry, Bob can't hear. That's, I think,
he's
part of the.
making a valid point. Do we need a consultant to rewrite it?
So I do need some assistance
Well,
with
maybe.
the housing plan and the
Maybe-
zoning regs and so forth. So that's
Maybe
kind of
if
part
we
of.
changed it to the extent that we felt it should be changed. And then at the tail end, after we've gone through the draft, which will be probably minimal, minimal changes, then we call him in at the end. That would even be less expensive. But anyway, I'm in
The
favor of
consultant have the
going.
better knowledge as to
Yeah.
how to write it, like.
Well, no,
what's
it's all been
required.
written. I mean, we're gonna just basically, take out, well, anyway, okay, and
Well, we
I,
need to address new things that have happened since.
yeah, I've changed my opinion. I mean, I'll go with Tiggy.
We're 4 years into this 5-year plan.
And we need to start
And
updating.
we have accomplished some things, and that's good. If we use a consultant, we'll get an update of this, which will say, continue doing the good stuff, and you still haven't done these things, and we can see which things haven't been
Right.
accomplished. We don't need a consultant to tell us that.
Well, here's where I'm going. I don't check. Do you have any thoughts on this?
I'm wondering why you've had to ask the question 4 times.
I'm just trying to get an answer.
So, you asked, yeah, I know you are.
That's,
So I say stay the course, stick with the person who knows what he's done.
We're gonna need to bring someone in,
so,
especially to digest what they come out with in special session. And keep us on track.
so. Alright, should I move on to so we're
Yeah.
kind of getting a consensus, we're staying with type P.
Yes.
But in the
That's-
meantime, we worried about what's gonna happen at the special session, totally understand that. So Nick and I were talking about kind of the next steps for us to dig into this. With or without, whoever the consultant is.
Right.
So we came up with an idea to have subcommittees.
Okay,
So the subcommittees would be groups of 2 who between now and November 19th would review 2 sections of this plan, not in a row. And then come back on the 19th, and I'll be here to help, we're all here to help. And to go through and look at this and say, okay, my team has gotten these 2 sections. And take a look at it and say, okay. Is this still consistent with the plan of development? My 2 sections with my committee member. Is the text here too focused on affordable housing? Because now we're gonna talk about housing, not just affordable housing, but use it to meet the statutory, so it would be a housing plan. And I wrote this all down. The other thing is that the borough was not involved initially. So appropriate points in the text to add the borough, because everything in here is the town of Old Saybrook. And then to think of some of the accomplishments through here, through your individual section. So, for example, there was no housing task force when this was written. There's different things that have happened, we've got this, we've had zoning regulation changes. So it's trying to say, okay, here we are 4 years later, and this is without the consultant, that we can just do some homework and then come back on November 19th Megan doesn't have the handout. I'm sorry, Megan.
There
That's
are
okay.
from a country of municipalities that require any new housing development to include affordable housing. And they customize their percentage of the units for their own locality. Seems to me that the housing task force should not be only affordable housing, but affordable housing, I feel, in my opinion, affordable housing must be a component of future housing construction.
Correct.
Yeah.
100% agree.
Alright,
Mhm. So these are the committees we've come up with. And like,
so Megan's not here, so well, she doesn't have this in front of her. She's here. So what we did was we kind of broke down different sections and different subcommittees, and we paired people. Kathy Seglin, she's pretty much not running, so she's retiring, so whoever the new person would be. And Megan, we went through and we teamed you with Jay.
Okay.
So the thought would be you could work together, read it individually, take it, and then we could take all that information, and by November 19th too, hopefully this special session, we're gonna have a better idea. Then we're gonna have some feedback and thoughts, and we could take all of that together, then go through, we're obviously gonna have to update some statistics and other things potentially that have changed that are in the document. And then go with a consultant, maybe to take all of it, put it all together, and then we review it as a group, if that.
that's the plan.
I'm good.
That's the plan, if that's how you wanna proceed.
Questions, comments, concerns?
Comment, I'm good.
Thank you.
You're a good partner.
No, we'll see. Can we do this at the monkey farm? I'm sure.
Maybe read it before we get there.
Yeah. Talk about it.
Alright,
All right,
so I guess the thing is. This is our plan. You're on board, subcommittees, November 19th. Feedback date, and then. Are you giving me the authority to go forward with Tyke for the update? Without going to bed?
I know this.
Yes.
yeah,
I just need some kind of so do you just wanna make a,
yeah, can I have a motion to approve moving forward with Tyke on the housing? With the housing plan for Old Saybrook? I can I get a second. Thank you, Jay. All those in favor? Aye.
I,
Any opposed? Any abstains? Thank you.
so thank you. So the one thing I did not put in here was the actions. Because I was gonna work on some of the actions, so. My thought is if we can all do something kind of at the same time, we have this DOH presentation, we're gonna get that going. And then, one thing that I asked Karen to help with, Karen's now our land use tech in the office, we talked about promoting ADUs as a concept. And I'm kind of jumping ahead and it's a lot for one meeting, I get it. So we talked about articles, so I had Karen put together an article. To explain. What. An ADU is. Sorry for the spot.
And I've already seen it, she did a nice job.
The article was not just me. I had some help revising it.
Was it chat?
Huh?
Was it chat?
Well, the one thing we were talking about is sometimes when you get Saybrook events. Kind of flip the page.
Yeah.
now, are you expecting a written
Yes,
something after?
yeah,
A written what?
No, I don't know, a written response.
notes on how you would update the section
So you
to
would-
include housing in general.
So you're gonna work with Bob,
Yeah,
and then you'll put together kind of a summary and thoughts on updates. It doesn't have to rewrite the section, it's just putting that information together and saying. There's this, there's that, now that it's housing, maybe we shouldn't include this.
Consider this, maybe we should take this out, that kind of thing. Just some thoughts. And if they're documented, that makes life a lot easier for Karen.
Thank God for Zoom, so I can go back.
So I'll have to teach you how to take the Zoom, put it through AI, so then you get the transcript.
Oh, that would be so nice.
So the thought would be we could use this ADU article, put it into Saybrook events. We can work in the office trying to do some promotion. Maybe put a little bit on the website. This was one of the things, that was a task. We also talked about at some point potentially having some kind of an educational meeting on ADUs, but I think with all of this going on right now, it'll probably be something in the new year. Does that sound like a plan? Not trying to overwhelm everybody, I'm just trying to make sure we got a lot of balls in the air
And I know you and I talked about this. The public session we would do, is that just on ADUs, because that's what it says in the current plan? Or can we make it talk about more about different types of housing, like the ADU or creating a 2-family or 3-family? To sort of get that feedback from the town, the people in town, the public, to what they have a propensity to accept.
Well, the other thing too, not to jump in, is that, so today was the last day of your housing survey. So the results, the thought, I'm hoping, and I think it makes sense to do a quick preview of them at the land use commission meeting. So the land use commission meetings are typically, for those of you who've never been, it's planning, zoning, all, and chairman of all the boards and commissions. So we invite like the chairman of the Mariners Way Committee, the chairman of the Tree Committee. It's a way we have presentations. It's important for this committee, this commission, and the zoning commission to be there. But it's also a way for everybody to kind of catch up and say, oh, did you know we're doing this at harbor management? So usually there's a representative of the other commissions, but this one's particularly important for all planning and zoning to be at. So, the thought was a quick little PowerPoint of the results for housing. The DOH grant presentation, which I have to come up with a name other than calling it the DOH grant. We gotta come up with something jazzy. And then this, Safe Streets for All presentation for the region, and then a round table of the chairman or representative of each.
when was that?
It's gonna be October 15th at 6 o'clock.
So the next meeting is at 6. Yeah. Potentially
And then
there
we
may
meet
be
at
a,
7, and then our meeting's at 7?
no,
So we're gonna cancel our meeting.
56. Okay.
Well, what happened is we might have to have, if it'll work, at 5:30. A special planning meeting, so I kind of coordinated all of this. I had an application for a waiver of the road regulations that I hope that we would have all the back and forth between our engineer and the fire department and everybody completed for tonight. That didn't happen. So if we can get all of those responses by the 15th, possibly, you know, either we could do it 5:30 or we could pick another time. I think that with the 2 presentations, the housing survey, I mean, we're looking at a good 2 hours for the land use meeting. But we could just do a 5:30 or 5. I'd say 5:30 because it may be a little bit
Will
complicated.
that be here?
That would be here
They're hearing.
if we need to.
Yeah, it's only on as needed basis.
And if I didn't have speakers, I would change it around, but it just.
Yeah. So just a heads up on that.
Which property for the changing of the fire department requirements, or is that for a specific property? or is
It's a specific waiver, so, and we don't wanna get into it because it's
Oh.
an application, but
Got it.
this commission, you're also the keeper of the regulations of public improvements. Those are your regulations. So it's a driveway waiver. It's up on the, on your website if you wanna take a sneak peek before the meeting, but I didn't wanna put it on the agenda without fire engineering and all those comments addressed, because I suspected, and don't say anything, you would want all of that before making a decision on a waiver. So,
I got the engineer's comments today.
okay.
Okay.
Have I overwhelmed you?
Mhm.
We do have a lot going on. I know sometimes it seems like we're not getting things done as quickly, but we have so many things going on simultaneously.
Just send me an email.
Megan, I sent you the committee assignments to your email.
Thank you.
Welcome. Didn't want you to feel left out.
No, I don't know what sections I have.
Oh, only the better one. All right,
They're the real tough ones.
I believe that's all we have on our agenda.
Megan, yours is what is Old Saybrook current and projected population profile, that section.
Nice.
And to review regional, local, or other initiatives since the adoption of the affordable
Huh.
housing plan. I
That
know
feels
you're
very appropriate.
But any Rivercog meeting I sit on to talk about housing, they focus on population too much.
Too much.
A little too much on the numbers. I'm in
They've
real
been more
estate.
interesting lately.
Okay. Motion to adjourn. Or does anyone have any other comments, questions? That'll take a motion to adjourn.
Just quick, a staff report other than housing. The hazard mitigation plan, we did get feedback. And we responded to the feedback. One of the questions or concerns was that we didn't adopt the plan. But it wasn't reviewed by FEMA. We thought that one was kind of interesting. So it wasn't endorsed by FEMA as being ready to adopt, but then we got written up because it didn't get adopted. There was a number of things about our flood ordinances and that. So Marilyn and I worked, we got that information back, we sent it all over, and now the government shut down. So, we'll see how that goes, and then with the our new Chapman Chalker Resilience Plan, we're waiting for the quality assurance plan to be approved. But that's also probably potentially, I hope not, going to get delayed because of the government shutdown. So we'll see how things go, but those are my updates.
Okay. With that, I'll make a motion to adjourn. I give a second. And all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstaining? Very good. Thank you.
Right.